That's right. Now, say my name.
You are now listening to the Unscripted Ohio Podcast, brought to you by Buckeye Grove and in part by JFQ Lending. All your home purchase and refinance needs should be handled by a Buckeye. You'll never pay for your appraisal with these guys. Licensed in 33 states and more on the way. Check them out at jfqlending.com. For the latest news, notes, analysis, and discussion, check us out on buckeyegrove.com and follow us on Twitter at UnscriptedOhio1. Now, broadcasting from Podcast Central, a place that is not his mother's basement.
Hey, Ma! Can we get some meatloaf?
We promise. Here's your host, Kyle Lamb.
Hey, Ma! The meatloaf!
I tell you what, ladies and gentlemen, I have gone from slightly annoyed with the trendy Cincinnati buzz over the summer to a little bit more paranoid about this game. I'm on high alert. I think that Cincinnati is, well, they're clearly not as talented as Ohio State, but I think this is going to be one of those games where they're just a little bit of a persistent pest where, you know, Ohio State fans buckle up because this could be one of those frustrating games where you just feel like they should be out to a 21, 28-point lead, and they just never quite get there and never able to put them away. Anyhow, Good Friday. This is Unscripted Ohio. We are on the Unscripted Ohio Podcast Network. That makes me your esteemed host, Kyle Lamb. I am truly and utterly appreciative of all the patronage and the listenership, and thank you for making us a part of your day. Thanks actually for making us a part of your week, because we've had some great stuff. You know, we are here because of three really, I think, and I'm biased here, but I think three really good podcasts. Corey and Johnny do a great job on Tuesdays and Thursdays with the Scarlet and Gray podcast. If you did not hear this latest edition, the Thursday edition, please check it out. They do an ode to Urban Meyer, and I promise, have a Kleenex box handy. You know, have it sitting right next to you when you're listening, because you might get teary-eyed. You don't have to admit it. That's okay. I know some of you guys are a little, well, you just don't want to admit when you get soft. But I just promise you, it's a very emotional episode. Johnny delivers a great monologue, kind of recapping Urban's career, and then Corey has a sensational montage that I think you'll really enjoy in the middle of the episode. I don't want to spoil it, but I promise you, go listen to the Scarlet and Gray podcast from Thursday if you have not done so. It is definitely worth your time. And also Thursday, Shane Larson, the Gridiron Game Time, second episode so far. He goes over the college football, what we saw this past weekend, Boise State's, comeback over Florida State, the huge second half surge. How Auburn was kind of resilient against Oregon and freshman Bo Nix, which, by the way, look, Bo Nix is a true freshman, so I'm not criticizing him, but my goodness, Chris Fowler was overboard on the hype of Bo Nix on Saturday. But that's another topic for another day. But he goes into, Jalen Hurts looking really good against Houston and many of the storylines from this past weekend, as well as some of the games coming up this weekend. So that's Shane Larson with Gridiron Game Time. Check those two shows out from Thursday if you have not done so. And, of course, next Tuesday, Chris Drew will be back with episode number 2 of the Dog Days podcast for you Cleveland Browns. Anyhow, so moving on, we are here thanks in part to Buckeye Grove, which is our, which basically is responsible for this show, moving on and going forward as we have. And of course, we also are sponsored by JFQ Lending. Please check them out. All of your mortgage and refinance needs should be handled by Buckeye. Licensed in 33 states and more on the way. Check them out at jfqlending.com. And we are also here with support from GoBus, with over 40 stops across Ohio, with popular destinations like Hocking Hills, Mohican State Park, and many of Ohio's big cities. Go to ridegobus.com or give them a call, 1-888-95-GO-BUS. So, I'm not going to try to get everybody panicked here, but the Cincinnati game, over the summer, a lot of people were talking about how, this is a trap game for Ohio State, a dangerous game, one that Ohio State could lose. Cincinnati is really talented. Obviously Luke Fickell has done a great job with that program, and I mean that sincerely. But there was just a little bit too many people trying too hard to think outside the box. And it was getting annoying, and I even said so on the show. I think back in, I want to say it was July, I said I was a little tired of the trendy Cincinnati picks. But I got to say, as this game gets closer, and, it's a noon kickoff on Saturday. That game's on ABC, by the way. I'm starting to change my opinion just a little bit, because I'll tell you why. Because I'm still unsure of what we're going to see Ohio State on offense, especially on the offensive line with the run game. I actually am pretty convinced that this Ohio State defense, which looks fast and looks disruptive, is legit. I don't think we're going to see a lot of problems with Cincinnati. Michael Warren is a great back. I think Cincinnati is capable of, slow playing a lot of defenses out there and wearing them down and moving the ball just with the run game. But I don't think they can do that to Ohio State on Saturday. I think Ohio State is going to dominate up front. I think they're going to keep Michael Warren in check. And, look, I was somewhat impressed with Desmond Ridder, a third-year sophomore, played quarterback for Cincinnati against UCLA this past weekend. I thought he looked decent. He was better than I expected. Threw for 246 yards, a couple touchdowns, and interception. He managed the game pretty well, and he was fairly accurate. And, of course, he can make some plays with his feet. But that UCLA defense is not very good, and I think this is going to be a whole different world he's going to be facing tomorrow against Ohio State. I'm not worried about Cincinnati putting up a lot of points. Now, they're going to try, I think, probably to slow this game down, manage and limit the number of possessions, number of plays in the game. I really think that they're going to be very conservative and maybe throw a couple trick plays here and there when Ohio State's not expecting it. But for the most part, I don't think they're going to get too cute. And I just don't see Cincinnati scoring a lot of points. But Cincinnati does have a good defense. Their front seven is pretty experienced, although, they've got some new guys in there, but they've got guys that have been around the program 3, 4, 5 years. And they've got a really good secondary. I do think this is going to be an interesting test for the Buckeyes offensively. And by the way, we've got Jason Stamm coming up here in a few minutes. We're going to continue to preview this game. Jason is the managing editor of the Bearcat Report. They are an affiliate of the Rivals Network, covering Cincinnati. So Jason will be along in a few minutes, and we'll continue this discussion, get his side of things, his perspective, his preview of Cincinnati and this Bearcats team. But anyhow, so where I think this game is going to be important for Ohio State is up front. Was that first quarter legit? Was the second quarter, the smoke, or was the first quarter the smoke and mirrors, and was the second quarter legit? I know, as I said earlier in the week, I think you have to take that with a grain of salt, because Ohio State really did, kind of shuffle up, change things up on the offensive line in the second quarter, and they got a little out of rhythm. And I think it showed with the blitz pickups and the consistency and the continuity and taking the ball out of Justin Fields' hands, and Florida Atlantic getting aggressive defensively with blitzing. All of these things add up to, I think, some of the reasons why Ohio State stopped being effective. And I think it's as much as motivation as it is the personnel and some of the other issues I just mentioned. But they are in for a lot tougher test. So Ohio State's ability to run the ball tomorrow against Cincinnati, for me, is really the big key to this game. If Ohio State can run for 5, 6, 7, maybe even 8 yards a carry tomorrow, which, that's a little bit on the high side, but if they were to pull that off, I think they win this game going away. Because I think Ohio State will make some big plays in the pass game. I think Justin Fields will probably be asked to keep the ball and run zone reads and just make plays with his feet a little more than we saw after the first quarter against Florida Atlantic. I really do think we're going to see more of him in this type of game. I still think Cincinnati is going to sludge it up. It's going to be an ugly, muddy game. I think both teams, for the most part, are going to do a pretty good job up front of slowing the other team's run game down. But Ohio State has to get the run game going. If it's going to be a true national title contender, then Ohio State needs to be able to run the ball effectively. I liked what I saw physically out of J.K. Dobbins on Saturday. It's the mental side, just seeing the holes and hitting them and having the patience to wait for them. I think that's where Dobbins, still has some room for improvement. I think the actual physical running ability, he looked a lot better than he did, I thought, at most points of the 2018 season. So that's where I'm at here with this team and with this game. This summer, I was like, you know what? Ohio State's going to be favored by 17, 20, maybe even 21 points. I think people are getting a little carried away with the trendy, watch this game as an potential upset. Cincinnati is ripe, to pick off Ohio State. But now I'm a little bit on the other side of that. Okay, I'm the spread opened up at 16.5 points. It's come down just a little bit. I'm even thinking this could be a 10 to 13 point game, and maybe even closer. It could be single digits. Now, that being said, if you just focus on pure talent, again, Ohio State has the explosive athletes, number one. That's advantage number one. And advantage number two is the depth. Ohio State can throw in 6, 7, 8, 9 defensive linemen at Cincinnati and not have a huge drop-off in production. They can throw second-team linebackers, second-team defensive backs. On the offensive side of the ball, we know the kind of depth and talent that they have at wide receiver. Jeremy Ruckert, can he repeat his performance at tight end? Expect Master Teague to continue getting incorporated into the offense. He's a guy that really they're still very high on. He's been banged up most of this fall, but I think as he gets more reps, they're going to get him incorporated into the offense as well. I still think by the end of the year, by the way, I think Marcus Crowley is a guy that could still get some playing time. But if Teague and Dobbins are both healthy, maybe it doesn't happen. Maybe they just hold him off and redshirt him. But he is going to be a factor at Ohio State before his career is all said and done. So we know that the depth is, greatly favoring Ohio State, and we know the star talent is there. And that's the two big differences. Just 1 to 22, 1 to, maybe 1 to 30. Cincinnati and Ohio State aren't much different, but at the top 1 through 5, and then when you get down 25 and 30 to 50, that's where you see the difference between these two programs. I think that is going to be the big differentiator on Saturday, and that's why Ohio State will pull away at the end. But again, as it gets closer, I'm just telling you, don't be shocked if this is a closer game than maybe some of us expected, myself included. As I said, back in the summer, I was saying 21 to 24 points plus. But maybe it's not going to wind up that. I think it's going to be on the closer side of this, and Cincinnati is going to come in being very, very pesky tomorrow at the Horseshoe. All right, we're here now to preview the Ohio State-Cincinnati game this Saturday with managing editor of the Bearcat Report, Jason Stamm. Jason, thank you for joining the show. Appreciate you taking the time to do this.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
So I'm going to go with the low-hanging fruit first. The biggest, human interest storyline of this game, of course, is the return of Luke Fickell to Ohio Stadium, where he played and coached for several years. I know Luke. Everybody is familiar with Luke up here, and I know he probably downplays this, but how much, how does he talk about this game? Does he acknowledge it's a big deal for him, or is he trying to play it down and just make it about the team? How's he approaching this week?
Yeah, I mean, it's no secret how big this game is. I know. This is the game that they've been pointing to for pretty much. I think probably as soon as it got on the schedule. So there's so much on the line there's way more on the line, I think, for Cincinnati than there is for Ohio State. If you're Cincinnati, this is a chance to you're on a national stage, playing against a top 10 team, obviously a college football playoff contender. If you can pull off an upset, you talk about catapulting yourself into the national spotlight. You're really going to be ranked pretty high. You're already talking about, all the stuff that the could be's and the what ifs, if you could pull that off. But yeah, if you're Luke Fickell, you have to downplay it. You can't get you guys being too worked up about that. You've got to focus on the task at hand, because all that doesn't matter if they don't come out and perform. They can get as hype as they want to for this game, but if you get some missed assignments, some missed opportunities, it doesn't matter. So yeah, if you're Luke Fickell, you definitely got to kind of temper those expectations a little bit, just to keep these guys focused on this weekend. Because again, it doesn't take a genius to know just how, anybody who's really has an eye obviously Cincinnati, Ohio State, just how big this is for Cincinnati.
Over the weekend after the victory over Florida State or Florida Atlantic, Ohio State defensive line coach Larry Johnson paid Cincinnati probably the biggest compliment you could hear in that, he called this program a Big Ten program, with the kind of toughness and the defense and then the way they go about their business. What does that say about the job that Fickell has done at Cincinnati to get the program to the point where, it can go against UCLA and win a game by double digits and then turn around and have that kind of respect from the Ohio State coaching staff?
Yeah, it really, it's been over 10 years since they were in this kind of national spotlight. I think a lot of people maybe forget outside of Cincinnati that, under Brian Kelly, they went back-to-back. They were in the Sugar Bowl and the Orange Bowl back in 2008, 2009 before he left, obviously, to take on Notre Dame. So, this is a program that has had success before. It's just been a while. They had some down years there with Tommy Tuberville, and obviously Butch Jones had a little bit of success, but it wasn't quite to the level that Brian Kelly had. So, it starts with recruiting, and that's where they've really had a ton of success the last few years. You mentioned Luke Fickell even in the last question. I should have mentioned Marcus Freeman. There's a guy who is also big for him returning to Ohio State, and he's probably been the linchpin of what they've been able to do recruiting-wise. You look at it seems like every big recruit they've been able to get. Even Jaheim Thomas this year, for a Cincinnati kid, 4 stars, was a Rivals top 250 guy. That's all Marcus Freeman. They've really been able to sell what they're doing, sell the program, and they've been getting everybody, even down to the equipment managers, the training staff. Everybody has bought into what Luke Fickell is wanting to do, and you see the results. It also takes some talent. And again, they're getting that recruiting wise, and they've been able to find some diamonds in the rough. Desmond Ridder being, exhibit A with that. That guy I don't think he had any D1 offers coming out of a pretty big high school in Louisville, Kentucky, but just didn't have any offers. Nobody really knew about him. Cincinnati got wind of him, took a chance, and obviously they're reaping the benefits this year and last year. That we've seen just how talented Desmond Ridder is. So, it's really been all around, but it's been very impressive. It really has in a short amount of time, just what Luke Fickell can do. And he's absolutely put them in the conversation to be, that UCF, to be that best group of 5 team that can year in, year out compete for those big-time bowl games.
Yeah, you mentioned Ridder, and I definitely want to expound on him in the offense. But first, I want to ask you about the defense because they were stifling against UCLA. Limiting UCLA to just 12 first downs, 215 yards. I think they had 7 tackles for loss. There's a very experienced group, especially in that front 7. When you look at Brian Wright, the lead of the defense there in the middle, being a 5th-year senior. How good is that Cincinnati defense and was some of that UCLA just being that bad on offense? And what was that game, like in your mind?
Yeah, it's. I don't think you're far off. I think there is some experience in that front group, but that's saying a lot because they lost probably their 2 linchpins the last few years in that defense up front, and Cortez Brotman and Marcus Copeland, who both graduated after last year. Those guys were run stoppers up the middle. You weren't getting very far at all through those. They really, the last couple of years, if you look, the numbers speak for themselves. They have not, I don't know the approximate numbers, but there hasn't been a lot of success for anybody running up the middle. It's all been on outs, and it's been teams like UCF with those athletes that have been able to bounce outside a little bit. But so they're still, I think that's where they're probably a little untested is up front. They've, they had a couple of guys step up last week that. Again, I don't think it was a surprise, but seeing guys like Elijah Ponder and you mentioned Brian Wright at linebacker, but it's still up the middle. I think is probably where they're not quite as strong as they used to be. Secondary-wise, I'd still take their secondary up with a lot of other big teams in the country. Javon Hicks had a couple of takeaways last week, including a pick. Kobe Bryant, and that's not obviously the Kobe that we all know, C-O-B-Y Kobe Bryant. Is really probably he and Arquan Bush are definitely their top 2 corners. So there's a lot of talent back there in that secondary. But again, I think that's saying a lot. Just how impressive they did look on defense, losing arguably their 2 best players from last year.
Yeah, I think a lot of Ohio State fans would argue too, with the inconsistency of the offensive line in game one against Florida Atlantic. I think Buckeye fans are looking at this like, well, Cincinnati's ability to stop the run and Ohio State's ability to be able to run the ball and control the line of scrimmage. I think that's going to go a long way to tell us, if Cincinnati is going to make this a 4-quarter game and going to be in this at the end with a chance to win.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think linebacking core, secondary, I think there's a lot of strong pieces. I still think they're not quite tested. Cincinnati isn't quite tested. UCLA is not a ground and pound team, so I don't think that's really a great indication of where they are up front either. I mean, that's a athletic team. They had an athletic quarterback who obviously is still just very young, made some mistakes in Thomas Robinson. But I think it showed just how good that defense could be against a Power 5 team. I mean, they beat UCLA. It's 2 years in a row now. They've started the season with a win against UCLA. Last year was out in the Rose Bowl, and that obviously is what kind of propelled their season last year. But yeah, I mean, and even I know talking to Kevin Noon earlier this week, and so I was telling him if I'm Ohio State, I still looking to pound up the middle and really test those guys up front. Just because I think I don't think it's a massive drop off. There's still capable guys there, but the talent is not nearly what it was with Broughton and Copeland the last couple of years.
You mentioned Desmond Ritter's performance against UCLA, 242 yards, couple touchdowns, 1 interception, and I think it's fair to say, even judging just from one game, that Michael Warren's sophomore season, where he rushed for over 1,300 yards and 5.5 a carry, he's got the attention of the opposing defenses, and so it feels like teams are going to make this a habit of really loading up and try to stop the run and make Desmond Ridder beat them. Is that fair to say?
I think it is, but that's the thing with Malik Vann. He's not just a runner. I mean, he's a guy. They're going to get him. I mean, if you shut him down running the ball at the middle, then Cincinnati will adapt by getting him the ball out in space, whether that's in screens or little dumps underneath. They're going to get Michael Warren the ball. Now, again, that's where it comes down to Ohio State. Their linebacking core, even stopping that stuff over the top that I just mentioned. But they still do have some weapons in other places. Thomas Geddes obviously being a big one outside. Rashad Medeiros, Jason Jackson. And they have some weapons at receiver. But, yeah, it's going to come down to really Desmond Ridder. I mean, I think what the biggest part of the offense is still Michael Warren. I mean, it 100% goes through him. But Desmond Ridder obviously is right there. It's kind of a 1A, 1B. Because if you look, the 2 games they lost last season were the only 2 games I think that you could say he probably got a little rattled. And that was the first half against Temple. Second half, he looked much better. And they ended up coming back and making it, almost winning there at the end. The UCF, that was the other one that you could just tell he didn't look anything like anything like the way he did the rest of the season. So if they can rattle Desmond Ridder, they can shut down Michael Warren, then, yeah, I would say you can shut down the offense, but you've done a pretty good job of getting pretty close to it.
How do you see Cincinnati approaching this game offensively? Some coaches will come into a game like this and they'll attempt to just really slow it down, play ball control, try to limit the number of snaps and hopes of pulling an upset. And then other coaches will come out aggressively and go, outside, above and beyond their comfort zone to try to win the game with plays that maybe the defense isn't prepared for. How do you see Cincinnati striking that balance on Saturday?
Yeah, I mean, Cincinnati is not one of those teams that's going to air it out every time. I don't think they're really going to try to, go over the Hail Mary on the first play or anything like we've seen some of these teams that just don't have nothing to lose going for them. And they're going to give you a really good dose of, Michael Warren up the middle, hopefully, and getting the ground game going, but also mixing in some maybe 7-8 yard outs. I'm not saying like deep throws, but they're going to give you a good mix. So, time of possession is what's going to come down to. They're going to totally try to control the ball because, we know how talented Ohio State is on offense. I mean, you don't want to give them the opportunity to get the ball back. And, I know Justin Fields is still getting probably acquainted to things a little bit, but he's a very talented quarterback that Ohio State has. So you don't want to give him the ball and let him, do what he does. So I think that's the big thing is ball control. And, again, that starts with having a good mix of Michael Warren on the ground, but also getting some of these other weapons involved with at receiver and even tight end. They've got a couple of really good tight ends Josiah DeGuara probably to be in the top one there, but Josh Weil, Leonard Taylor, got some other guys that can get the ball too. So you're going to see a lot of two tight end sets. They really like making use of their tight ends, which is why they've really loaded up on them in recruiting the last couple of years. But yeah, a lot of it's really going to come down to ball control for sure.
He's Jason Stamm. He is the managing editor of Bearcat Report. They are an affiliate on the Rivals Network covering Cincinnati. Noon Eastern kickoff on ABC, Ohio State, Cincinnati this weekend. Jason, thanks again for taking the time to preview this game for us.
Absolutely.
Stretch runtime here at Unscripted Ohio. Kick up your feet as we cross the finish line with the Buckeye Beat, the latest in Ohio State news and notes.
Kick the tires and light the fires, Big Daddy.
So before I end things today on Unscripted Ohio, we have a little bit of basketball news I want to touch on here for a few minutes. I know you're all amped up and jazzed up. It's college football season, and this is why I don't spend a lot of time here. And starting maybe in October, we'll start talking more basketball. But frankly, there just hasn't been a ton to talk about. They've had a few commitments we've touched on in the 2019, 2020, 2021 classes, and we'll talk more about that in the future when the time comes. But there was some scheduling news that I thought was worth bringing to your attention now. Don't forget about this basketball team because they're going to start the season as a top 10, top 20 type of team. It really kind of depends on the publication that you're looking at. But Ohio State has a chance to have a really special season. I'm not sure that they're going to be a national title contender. I think that they're just missing one or two stars for that. But they've got the type of team that can compete this year with Michigan State. Michigan State is going to be the favorite, but they're the type of team that can compete with a Michigan State. Michigan will be interesting under Juwan Howard, a completely new nucleus. I'm not sure I should throw them in that conversation just yet, but they can compete with the Marylands, the Michigan States, the Purdues. It'll be interesting to watch this Ohio State team, but we do have some scheduling news, and you can look at it one of two ways because the non-conference schedule, we've touched on this in the past, is going to be brutal, potentially brutal. It's going to be, at minimum, very, very tough with the potential of being excruciatingly tough. And then the conference schedule, I thought Ohio State was given a little bit of a reprieve relative to the potential really tough games. You kind of see spots where Ohio State has a chance to get some momentum, and this is going to be an interesting team to watch. Like I said, it's young, but it's very talented. The point guards you're going to love, DJ Carton and CJ Walker, the transfer from Florida State. They've got EJ Liddell, who's going to be a stud power forward for Ohio State, I think, right away. Alonzo Gaffney is the guy that gets a lot of the attention because he's the athletic, 6'9", 6'10", freakishly, talented wing type. But I think E.J. Liddell is going to be the guy that right away is really good for Ohio State. But Caleb Wesson has trimmed down again. I think you're going to see a big jump from him. This Ohio State team has a chance to be really good, but the schedule is going to be interesting because they get into it right away. The times, we already knew the games, but the times were released on Friday, or on Thursday, so we now know what times and networks that Ohio State will be playing on. Of course, they open the season at home, 8:30 p.m. start on November 6th. That's an FS1 game against Cincinnati. 1 week from then, they also host Villanova, also on FS1. So in the first week of the season, they're going to be playing Cincinnati and Villanova with UMass Lowell sandwiched in between. You look through the schedule, later in November, they have their St. John Arena game, home against Kent State. Then they start December, very, very rough month, where they're at North Carolina in the ACC Challenge, Penn State and at Minnesota, early Big Ten games. And then they end the month with a neutral court game in Las Vegas against Kentucky, and then they play West Virginia up in Cleveland. So that is all those games I just mentioned will be in the month of December. And then their Big Ten, the rest of their Big Ten slate goes as follows: Wisconsin at home, at Maryland, at Indiana, Nebraska at home, at Penn State, Minnesota at home, at Northwestern, Wisconsin again, at Michigan, at Wisconsin. Actually, that can't be right. There's Wisconsin listed 3 times. You can blame Kevin over at Buckeye Grove. I'm reading off of his schedule. He's got Wisconsin listed 3 times. That can't be right. But just take my word for it. They do play Wisconsin twice. At Michigan, Rutgers, Purdue, at Iowa, Maryland, at Nebraska, Michigan, Illinois, at Michigan State. So the good news is a lot of the tough games are at home. They don't play some of the tougher teams like Michigan State. They only play once, and that's at the very end of the season. So I think this is a very, very manageable schedule for Ohio State with a young team. The only downside is that having a young team, they are very, very loaded up top, especially with those home games in the first week of the season against Cincinnati and Villanova. But if they're able to start those games 2-0, 3-0, if you include the UMass Low game, and then get into December and get past that North Carolina road game and then a Kentucky neutral court game, hey, if they somehow escape that non-conference schedule with no more than 1 or 2 losses, then I think they have a chance to really come together and develop. And this is going to be an exciting season for Ohio State basketball. Again, they're going to, depending on what publication you look at, they're going to start anywhere from probably 10th to 25th in the country. So you're looking at a top 20, top 25 type team for Ohio State basketball. Should be a fun season, but we will talk more about that later once we get into September, October, and especially November. So that is going to wrap it up. As I said, make sure you check out, if you haven't done so already, check out Johnny and Corey's Scarlet and Grape podcast, The Ode to Urban Meyer. That was from Thursday. Also, Shane Larson with Gridiron Game Time. I will be back on Monday to recap the Ohio State-Cincinnati game. Chris Drew and Corey and Johnny will be back on Tuesday. Chris with the second edition of the Dog Days podcast. I'm sure he'll be talking about the Browns season opener this weekend against the Titans. Make sure you follow me on Twitter at KYLam. KYLam number 8, actually. We are now on Facebook, by the way. You can search Unscripted Ohio on Facebook. Be sure to like and follow our page. We are also on BuckeyeGrove.com every Monday, Wednesday, Friday. And all 4 of our shows, as well as the Buckeye Grove Rapid Reaction Show, can be found on Unscripted Ohio. You can find us on SoundCloud, iTunes, Google Play, Stitcher, and Spotify. That's going to do it for me. Have a great weekend. Enjoy the game. We'll be back at you on Monday.
You can get new episodes of Unscripted Ohio on Mondays and Fridays exclusively at BuckeyeGrove.com or anytime on SoundCloud, iTunes, Google Play, or Stitcher. Be sure to subscribe to stay up to date on all things Ohio State.